Captain Amy Rodriguez stood at the large window of the research station, watching the stars spread out like diamonds on black cloth. The station called Horizon's Edge floated quietly around a new planet that scientists had found just 6 months ago. The planet below had blue oceans and green land that looked almost like Earth, but no signs of intelligent life. Amy was not a scientist. She was a military officer who had been sent to protect the research team and handle any problems that might come up. She had short brown hair and calm brown eyes that missed nothing. At 32 years old, she had already served in 3 different space missions and knew how to handle difficult situations. The research station was not very big. It had living quarters for 50 people, several labs, a small medical bay, and a command center where Amy spent most of her time. Dr. Ben Carter ran the science team, and he was always excited about something new they had discovered. Chief Petty Officer Lisa Park handled security with Amy, and Lieutenant Jake Morrison kept the station systems running smoothly. Amy liked the quiet life on the research station. After years of military action, it felt good to have peaceful days where the biggest problem was usually a broken coffee machine or an argument between scientists about test results. But she knew that peaceful times in space never lasted very long. The alarm started ringing at 0800 hours, just as Amy was finishing her morning coffee. Red lights flashed in the command center, and Morrison called out from his station, "Captain, we have an unknown ship approaching fast. It's big, and it's not responding to our communication attempts." Amy set down her coffee cup and moved to the main display screen. The ship that appeared on the screen was unlike anything she had seen before. It was dark gray and covered with sharp angles that looked like weapons. The ship was at least 3 times bigger than their research station. "Any idea what species it belongs to?" Amy asked. Dr. Carter hurried into the command center, looking worried. "Based on the ship design, I think it might be Chthoni. We've heard reports about them from other human colonies. They're a military species that likes to take over new territories." Amy felt her stomach tighten. The Chthoni Empire had a bad reputation throughout the galaxy. They were known for attacking first and asking questions later. Most species tried to avoid contact with them. "How long until they reach us?" Amy asked Morrison. "About 15 minutes at their current speed." Amy activated the station's emergency alert system. All non-essential personnel were to report to the secure areas of the station immediately. She also sent a message to Earth Command, letting them know about the situation. But Earth was too far away to send help quickly. "Dr. Carter, gather all your important research data and prepare to transfer it to the secure storage system. Chief Park, get our security team ready, but keep weapons on standby only. We don't want to start a fight if we can avoid it." The next 15 minutes felt like hours. Amy watched the alien ship grow larger on the screen as it approached. When it was close enough, she could see gun ports along its sides and strange markings that probably meant something in the Chthoni language. "Incoming transmission," Morrison announced. Put it on the main screen. The face that appeared on the screen made several people in the command center step back. Commander Vextar was a Chthoni, and like all of his species, he looked like a giant lizard that had learned to walk on 2 legs. He was over 7 feet tall with dark green scales that looked like natural armor. His yellow eyes had no pupils that humans could see, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough. "Human Station, this is Commander Vextar of the Chthoni Imperial Fleet. You are in territory that now belongs to Chthoni Empire. You will surrender all research data and prepare to abandon the station immediately." Amy stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. "Commander Vextar, I am Captain Amy Rodriguez. This research station is operating under Earth authority in neutral space. We have legal claim to be here and have not entered any Chthoni territory." X-Star's eyes seemed to glow brighter with anger. "There is no neutral space, human. There's only space that belongs to the strong and space that will soon belong to the strong. Your species is weak. You spend time studying rocks and plants when you should be building weapons and taking what you need. We prefer diplomacy to violence. Commander, perhaps we can discuss the situation and find a solution that works for both our peoples." The Chthoni commander made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a growl. Diplomacy is what weak species use when they cannot fight. I will board your station with my soldiers. You will give me all your research data, and then you will leave. If you resist, we will take what we want, and you will not leave alive." Amy felt her military training take over. Her voice became calm and steady, the way it always did in dangerous situations. "Commander, I cannot allow you to take our research data or force us to leave. This station is under my protection." "Your protection?" Vexstar's scales seemed to shift color slightly, becoming darker. "You are a female. In Chthoni culture, females do not lead warriors. They do not make decisions about war and peace. You will bring me the real commander of the station." Dr. Carter started to say something, but Amy held up her hand to stop him. She had dealt with alien cultures that looked down on human women before. The best way to handle it was to stay professional and not let anger cloud her judgment. "I am the commanding officer of this station, Commander Vextar. If you wish to board and discuss the situation face-to-face, you may do so, but you will follow our station protocols and limit your party to 5 individuals." Vextar stared at her for a long moment. Amy could see him thinking, probably trying to decide if she was insulting him or if humans really were strange enough to let females command military units. "I will board your station with my soldiers. We will see how long your diplomacy lasts when you face real warriors." The transmission ended, and the command center fell silent except for the quiet hum of the station systems. Amy looked around at her crew. She could see worry in their faces, but also determination. They trusted her to handle this situation, and she was not going to let them down. "Chief Park, prepare Docking Bay 2 for Chthoni shuttle. I want our security team in position, but not visible. Dr. Carter, make sure all critical data is secured. Morrison, keep monitoring their ship for any sign of weapons charging." Amy took a deep breath and prepared to meet the most dangerous alien commander she had ever faced. The Chthoni shuttle docked with Horizon's Edge exactly 30 minutes after Commander Vextar ended his transmission. Amy stood in the main meeting room, which was the largest space on the station where they could hold formal discussions. She had chosen to meet the aliens here instead of the smaller command center to give everyone more room to move around if things went badly. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood near the door, ready to call for help if needed. Chief Petty Officer Lisa Park was positioned where she could see both the main entrance and the emergency exit. Dr. Ben Carter sat at the conference table with a datapad, ready to answer any questions about their research. Amy wore her standard military uniform, clean and pressed, with her rank insignia clearly visible. She had decided not to wear any weapons, hoping that would help keep the meeting peaceful. But she was not defenseless. Years of military training had taught her how to fight without weapons if necessary. The airlock hissed open, and Commander Vextar entered the meeting room. Up close, he was even more intimidating than he had appeared on the communication screen. He stood almost 8 feet tall, and his dark green scales looked thick enough to stop bullets. His yellow eyes moved around the room, studying everything and everyone. Behind him came 4 Chthoni soldiers. They were smaller than their commander, but still much larger than any human. Each soldier carried what looked like an energy weapon attached to their belt. The weapons were not drawn, but Amy noticed that the soldiers kept their hands close to them. "So," Vextar said, his voice filling the room like distant thunder, "this is the famous human diplomacy. A small room with weak creatures who think talking can solve problems that require strength." Amy stepped forward, keeping her voice calm and professional. "Welcome aboard Horizon's Edge, Commander. I hope we can find a peaceful solution to the situation that respects both our people's interests." Vextar walked around the conference table, his clawed feet clicking on the metal floor. He was studying the humans the way a predator might study prey. "Your interests do not matter, human female. The Chthoni Empire takes what it needs. Your research data about this planet will help us decide if we want to colonize it. You will give us this data and leave." "I'm afraid I cannot do that, Commander. This research represents months of work by our team, and it belongs to Earth Science Command. However, we might be able to share some of our findings through proper diplomatic channels." The Chthoni commander stopped walking and turned to face Amy directly. His scales had darkened even more, and she could see that he was becoming angry. In the corner of her eye, she noticed that his soldiers had moved slightly closer to their weapons. "You continue to speak as if you have choices in this matter," Vextar said. "Let me explain something about Crithani culture, human. When a superior warrior makes a demand, inferior beings obey. There is no discussion. There is no negotiation. There is only submission or death." Dr. Carter started to stand up from his chair, probably planning to say something that might make the situation worse. Amy gave him a quick look that told him to stay quiet and let her handle this. "I understand your culture values strength, Commander, but human culture values justice and fairness. We believe that might does not always make right. We can both be strong in different ways." Vextar's yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Different ways? There's only one way to measure strength, human female. Physical power. The ability to dominate your enemies and take what you want. Everything else is weakness disguised as philosophy." The alien commander took a step closer to Amy. She could smell something like sulfur and metal coming from his scales. "You humans think you are clever with your words and your technology, but when it comes to real conflict, you are soft. You lack the killer instinct that separates warriors from victims." Amy felt her military training kicking in. She recognized the signs of an opponent who was working himself up to violence. Vextar was not just angry anymore. He was preparing to do something that would prove his point about strength and dominance. "Commander, I think there may be some misunderstanding about human capabilities. We prefer peaceful solutions, but that does not mean we are unable to defend ourselves when necessary." "Defend yourselves?" Vextar laughed, and the sound was like rocks grinding together. "You are small, weak creatures who have never faced real danger. Your species has lived too long in comfort and safety. You have forgotten what it means to fight for survival." Without warning, Vextar reached out with his large, clawed hand and grabbed Amy's arm. His grip was strong enough to leave bruises, and she could feel his claws pressing against her uniform. The alien commander was trying to force her to her knees, the way Crithani warriors made their enemies submit in battle. "This is how Crithani deal with those who refuse to obey," Vextar said, his voice full of satisfaction. "You will kneel before me, human, and then you will give me what I want." But Amy Rodriguez was not like most people that Vextar had encountered in his career as a military commander. Before joining the space service, she had spent 6 years as a Marine Corps instructor, teaching hand-to-hand combat to soldiers who might face enemies much larger and stronger than themselves. She had learned that size and strength were not the only factors in a fight. Speed, technique, and surprise could overcome almost any physical advantage. Instead of trying to pull away from Vextar's grip, Amy stepped closer to him. She used her free hand to grab his wrist, then twisted her whole body in a move that used the alien's own strength and weight against him. The technique was called a hip throw, and it worked just as well on 8-foot-tall alien warriors as it did on human opponents. Vextar found himself flying through the air with no idea how it had happened. He landed hard on the metal floor of the meeting room, his armor-like scales making a loud crash as he hit. For a moment, he lay there, too shocked to move. His soldiers started to reach for their weapons, but they stopped when they saw that their commander was not seriously hurt, just surprised. Amy stood over the fallen Crithani commander, breathing normally and showing no signs of effort. "As I said, Commander, humans may prefer peaceful solutions, but we are quite capable of defending ourselves when necessary." Vextar slowly got his feet, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. In his entire military career, no one had ever thrown him to the ground like that. He was the strongest warrior in his unit, feared throughout the Crithani Empire for his combat skills, and a small human female had dropped him in less than 3 seconds. The meeting room was completely silent except for the quiet hum of the station's air recycling system. The Crithani soldiers looked at their commander, then at Amy, then back at their commander. They did not know what to do in a situation like this. Their training had never prepared them for the possibility that their leader might be defeated by someone they considered weak. Amy straightened her uniform and looked at Vextar calmly. "Now, Commander, shall we discuss this situation like civilized beings, or do you need another demonstration of human defensive capabilities?" The silence in the meeting room stretched for what felt like forever. Commander Vextar stood slowly, his massive frame moving carefully as if he was not sure his legs would support him properly. His yellow eyes stayed fixed on Amy, but the confidence and aggression that had filled them before was gone. Now there was something else there, confusion, and perhaps the beginning of respect. The 4 Chthoni soldiers remained frozen in place, their hands still hovering near their weapons, but not quite touching them. Sub-Commander Kraltek, who was the second in command, kept looking back and forth between his leader and the human female who had just done the impossible. In Chthoni culture, physical dominance was everything. The strongest warrior led, and the weaker ones followed. But their strongest warrior had just been defeated by someone they had assumed was no threat at all. Amy watched Vextar carefully, ready to defend herself again, if necessary. But she could see that the alien commander was not preparing to attack. Instead, he seemed to be thinking very hard about what had just happened. She decided to give him time to process the situation while she checked on her own people. Lieutenant Morrison was still standing by the door, his eyes wide with amazement. Chief Park had moved closer to the group, ready to step in if the Chthoni soldiers decided to cause trouble. Dr. Carter was gripping his data pad so tightly that his knuckles had turned white, but he looked more excited than afraid. Sub-Commander Kraltek. Vextar said finally, his voice much quieter than before. "Did you observe what happened here?" Kraltek nodded slowly. He was a veteran warrior who had served under Vextar for many years, and he had never seen his commander defeated in single combat. "Yes, Commander. The human female used some kind of fighting technique that I have never seen before." "It was not just technique," Vextar said, still staring at Amy. "She moved with the speed and precision of a trained warrior. But our intelligence report said that human females do not participate in combat roles." Dr. Carter cleared his throat politely. "If I may explain, Commander, human military forces do not separate roles based on gender the way many alien species do. Captain Rodriguez is a trained combat veteran with extensive experience in hand-to-hand fighting techniques." Vextar's scales shifted color again, becoming lighter as his anger faded and was replaced by curiosity. "You mean that human females fight alongside males as equals?" "More than that," Amy said, deciding it was time to help the aliens understand human culture better. "In human society, an individual's abilities and training matter more than their physical size or gender. Some of our best fighters are women, and some of our best scientists and diplomats are men. We judge people by what they can do, not by what they look like." Sub-Commander Kraltek whispered something in the Chthoni language to one of the other soldiers. Amy could not understand the words, but she could tell from their tone that they were discussing this new information with great interest. "This changes many things," Vextar said slowly. "Our military analysts told us that humans were a weak species because they allowed females to hold leadership positions. We thought this meant that human males were too weak to maintain proper control of their society." "Human males are not weak," Amy replied. "They simply understand that strength comes in many forms. Lieutenant Morrison here is an expert in space navigation and engineering. Dr. Carter has knowledge about biology and chemistry that could help your people understand new planets and life forms. Chief Park is trained in both combat and security systems. Each person contributes their strengths to help the whole group succeed." Vextar walked slowly around the conference table again, but this time his movement was thoughtful rather than threatening. "In Chthoni society, the strongest individual leads and all others follow. Females are protected and cared for, but they do not make decisions about warfare or territory. We believe this was a natural way for all intelligent species. Every species develops differently based on their environment and history," Dr. Carter said, becoming more confident as the discussion moved into areas where his scientific knowledge was useful. "Humans evolved on a planet where cooperation and diverse skills were necessary for survival. We learned that groups with many different abilities were stronger than groups where everyone was the same." One of the Chthoni soldiers said something in their language, and Kraltek translated. Warrior Drexel asked if all human females are trained in combat like Captain Rodriguez. Amy shook her head. "Not all humans are soldiers, just like not all Chthoni are warriors. I assume. But those who choose military service receive the same training regardless of gender. Some become fighters, others become pilots, engineers, medics, or intelligence specialists. We use everyone's talents where they can be most effective. Vextar stopped walking and faced Amy directly. "Show me," he said. "I'm sorry. Show me these human fighting techniques. If what you say is true, if humans are stronger than our intelligence reports indicated, then I need to understand how strong you really are." Amy considered this request carefully. On one hand, demonstrating human combat abilities might make the Krathani more cautious about attacking human colonies. On the other hand, it might also give them information they could use against humans in future conflicts. "I could show you some basic defensive techniques," Amy said finally, "but I would need your word that this demonstration is for cultural understanding only, not for planning military action against human territories." Vextar thought about this for a moment. "You have my word as a Krathani commander. I am here to gather information, not to plan immediate attacks. Your species has already surprised me once today. I would rather understand you than underestimate you again." Amy looked at Chief Park, who nodded slightly. Park was also trained in hand-to-hand combat, and she would be a good partner for a demonstration that would not seriously hurt anyone. "Chief Park, would you mind helping me show our guests some human defensive techniques?" Park stepped forward with a slight smile. "My pleasure, Captain." Amy moved to an open area of the meeting room, where there was enough space to move around safely. The Krathani soldiers gathered around to watch, their yellow eyes focused intently on the two human women. "The technique I use on Commander Vextar is called a hip throw," Amy explained. "It uses an opponent's strength and momentum against them. The key is not to fight their power directly, but to redirect in the direction they're not expecting." She demonstrated the move slowly with Chief Park, showing how to grab an opponent's arm and use their own movement to throw them off balance. Park played the role of the attacker, moving forward as if she was trying to grab Amy, and Amy showed how to step aside and use the attacker's momentum to send them to the ground. "The principle works regardless of size difference," Amy continued. "A smaller defender can defeat a larger attacker if they use proper technique and timing." Vextar watched the demonstration with growing amazement. "This is not how Krathani warriors fight. We rely on strength and natural weapons like claws and teeth. We try to overpower our enemies with direct force." "Both approaches have their advantages," Amy said diplomatically. "But humans have learned that intelligence and technique can often overcome raw strength. We study our opponents and look for weaknesses that we can exploit." Chief Park demonstrated several other defensive moves, including ways to escape from grabs and holds, and how to strike at vulnerable points that would stop an attacker without causing permanent injury. The Krathani soldiers watched every movement carefully, occasionally asking questions through Subcommander Kraltek. When the demonstration was finished, Vextar stood quietly for several minutes, clearly thinking hard about what he had seen. Finally he spoke. "Captain Rodriguez, I came here believing that humans were weak creatures who could be easily conquered. I now understand that this belief was based on incomplete and inaccurate information. Your species may be physically smaller than mine, but you are not weak." Amy felt a sense of relief. Maybe the situation could be resolved without violence after all. "Thank you for keeping an open mind, Commander. I hope this means we can discuss our situation here peacefully." "Perhaps," Vextar said. "But first, I must report what I have learned to my superiors. This information will change many of our assumptions about human military capabilities." Amy nodded. That was exactly what she had hoped to accomplish. Commander Vextar activated a small device on his belt, and Amy realized that he was opening a communication channel with his ship. She could hear voices speaking the Krathani language, but the words were too fast and unfamiliar for her to understand. However, the tone of the conversation told her that the news of what had happened was causing quite a stir among the alien crew. "My ship's crew witnessed our encounter through my personal recording device," Vextar explained after ending the communication. "They are having difficulty believing what they saw. Many of them think the recording must be damaged or false." Communications Officer Tim Walsh had arrived in the meeting room during the demonstration, and now he stepped forward. "Commander, if your crew is having trouble accepting what happened, perhaps we could arrange a direct communication link. Sometimes it helps to hear explanations directly from the people involved." Vextar considered the suggestion. That might be useful. My science officer, Veltar, has many questions about human biology and culture. She has been studying the limited information we have about your species. Amy was surprised to hear that the Krathani had female science officers. I would be happy to speak with her. Dr. Carter here is our lead scientist, and he has extensive knowledge about human development and culture. I should warn you, Vextar said, Veltar will ask many questions that might seem personal or strange to humans. Krathani scientists are very direct in their approach to gathering information. Wall set up the communication link quickly, and soon the meeting room's main screen showed the interior of the Krathani ship. The bridge was dark and filled with sharp angles, much like the exterior of the vessel. Several Krathani officers were visible, and Amy noticed that about half of them appeared to be female. A Krathani female stepped forward to speak. She was smaller than Vextar, but still taller than any human, with lighter green scales and bright orange markings around her eyes. I am Science Officer Veltar. Commander Vextar has told me that our assumptions about human capabilities were incorrect. I must ask direct questions to understand the truth. Please go ahead, Amy said. We'll answer as honestly as we can. First question. Is it true that human females participate in physical combat on equal terms with males? Yes, that's correct. In human military forces, men and women train together and serve in the same roles based on their individual abilities and interests. Veltar made notes on a device similar to Dr. Carter's datapad. Second question. How is this possible when human females are obviously smaller and less muscular than human males? Dr. Carter stepped forward to answer this one. Human combat training focuses on technique, speed, and intelligence rather than just raw strength. A smaller fighter who moves quickly and strikes precisely can defeat a larger opponent who relies only on muscle power. This is difficult for us to understand, Veltar admitted. In Krathani society, physical size and strength directly determine social rank and military position. The largest and strongest individuals become leaders, while smaller ones follow orders. Amy saw an opportunity to help the aliens understand human culture better. In human society, we believe that different situations require different types of leadership. A strong fighter might be the best choice to lead troops in battle, but a smart scientist might be better at leading a research mission. We try to match the leader's skills to the job that needs to be done. Subcommander Kraltek, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Veltar asked them about human pack structure. If females can be leaders, how do human males accept this? Do they not fight to establish dominance? Veltar repeated the question, and Amy could see that this was really the heart of what the Krathani were struggling to understand. Their entire society was built around the idea that physical dominance determines social order. Human males and females cooperate rather than compete for dominance, Amy explained. We choose our leaders based on their ability to make good decisions and inspire others to work together. A leader's gender is much less important than their skill and experience. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward. If I may add something, Captain, in our crew, Chief Park outranks me even though I'm male and she's female. She has more experience and better leadership skills in security matters. I follow her orders because she makes good decisions, not because of her gender. Chief Park nodded. And Lieutenant Morrison is our best navigation officer. When we need to plot a course through dangerous space, I follow his recommendations because he has the knowledge and training to keep us safe. Veltar's orange eye markings seemed to brighten as she processed this information. So humans select leaders based on competence in specific areas rather than overall physical dominance. Exactly, Dr. Carter said. A human military unit might have a female commander, a male pilot, a female engineer, and a male doctor, all working together as equals. Each person contributes their expertise to help the group succeed. On the screen, Amy could see other Krathani officers gathering around to listen to the conversation. Some of them were talking quietly among themselves, and she got the impression that this discussion was challenging many of their basic assumptions about how intelligent species should organize themselves. I have another question, Veltar said. If human females can fight as effectively as males, why do you prefer diplomacy to violence? Would it not be more efficient to simply take what you need through conquest? This question made Amy pause and think carefully about her answer. She realized that the Krathani were not just asking about human fighting abilities. They were trying to understand the philosophical differences between their two cultures. Humans have learned that cooperation usually produces better results than conquest, Amy said finally. When we work together with other species, we can share knowledge and resources in ways that benefit everyone. When we fight, both sides lose valuable people and resources, even if one side wins the battle. But surely your species has limits. Vextar interjected. There must be situations where humans will fight rather than negotiate. Of course, Amy admitted. When humans or our allies are threatened with destruction, we will defend ourselves with all the force necessary. But we prefer to save fighting as a last resort when all other options have failed. Dr. Carter added, human history shows us that wars are expensive and destructive. We've learned that it's usually better to invest our energy in building things rather than destroying them. Veltar was taking notes rapidly now. This suggests that human reluctance to fight comes from strategic thinking rather than physical weakness. That's right, Amy said. We choose our battles carefully and try to avoid conflicts that we don't need to fight. On the Krathani ship's bridge, Amy could see several officers engage in animated discussions. Some of them looked excited, while others appeared to be arguing. She wondered what they were saying about this new information. Commander Vextar, Amy said, I think this conversation shows that our two species have developed very different approaches to the same basic challenges. We both want our people to be safe and successful, but we've chosen different methods to achieve these goals. Vextar nodded slowly. Yes, Captain Rodriguez. And I am beginning to understand that the Krathani Empire's intelligence about human capabilities has been seriously flawed. We assumed that your peaceful behavior meant you were weak. We did not consider that it might be a choice made by a strong species that prefers other methods. Amy felt a growing sense of hope. Maybe this encounter would end with understanding rather than violence. But she also knew that changing the minds of an entire empire would not be easy, even if she had convinced one ship's crew. What happens now, Commander? She asked. Vextar looked at his science officer on the screen, then back at Amy. Now I must decide what to report to my superiors. This information could change how the Krathani Empire views humanity, but change is not always welcome, even when it is necessary. The communication with the Krathani ship continued for another hour as more questions were asked and answered. Amy noticed that the aliens seemed particularly interested in human military organization and training methods. They wanted to understand how humans could be effective fighters without following the dominance-based hierarchy that governed Krathani society. Sergeant Maria Lopez arrived in the meeting room during this discussion. She had been Amy's training partner when they both served in the Marine Corps, and Amy thought she might be able to provide some additional demonstrations of human combat techniques. Sergeant Lopez, Amy said, would you mind showing our guests some of the training methods we use to develop fighting skills? Lopez was a compact woman with short black hair and arms that showed the muscle development of someone who spent a lot of time in physical training. She looked at the massive Krathani soldiers with interest rather than fear. Sure thing, Captain. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? Perhaps you could show them how humans train to fight opponents who are larger and stronger than themselves. Lopez nodded and moved to the open area where Amy and Chief Park had demonstrated earlier. The key to fighting bigger opponents is to never meet their strength directly. You use speed, angles, and leverage to make their size work against them. She asked navigation specialist Chris Evans to help with the demonstration. Evans was a tall, thin man who was much larger than Lopez, but had no combat training. This made him perfect for showing how technique could overcome size advantage. Chris, grab my wrist like you're trying to control me, Lopez instructed. Evans wrapped his hand around Lopez's wrist, using his longer reach and greater strength to hold her arm in place. For a moment, it looked like he had successfully restrained her. Then Lopez twisted her arm in a specific way that broke Evans's grip instantly. Before he could react, she had grabbed his wrist instead and used a simple arm lock to control his movement. The human body has natural weak points in its structure, Lopez explained to the watching Krathani. If you know where these points are and how to exploit them, size becomes much less important. She demonstrated several more techniques, showing how to escape from various types of grabs and holds. Each time, she used Evans's own strength and momentum against him, making it impossible for him to maintain control despite his physical advantages. Commander Vextar watched these demonstrations with growing amazement. These techniques work against any opponent, regardless of size? Within reason, Lopez replied. There are limits to what technique can overcome. But a trained human fighter can defeat opponents who are much larger, as long as they use the right methods. Subcommander Kraltek asked a question in Krathani, and Vextar translated. He wants to know if human children are taught these fighting methods. Not usually, Amy answered. Most human children learn basic self-defense, but advanced combat training is reserved for those who choose military or law enforcement careers. We don't believe in training everyone to be a warrior. Why not? Vextar asked. If these techniques are so effective, would it not be wise to teach them to all humans? Dr. Carter stepped forward to explain. Human society is based on specialization. We train some people to be fighters, others to be scientists, others to be teachers or engineers or artists. Each person develops their particular talents to help the whole community. But what if you are attacked? Kraltek asked through the translation device. How can non-warriors defend themselves? That's what people like Captain Rodriguez and Sergeant Lopez are for, Evans said. They protect the rest of us, so we can focus on our own jobs. It's more efficient than having everyone spend time learning to fight. Veltar's voice came through the communication link from the Krathani ship. This specialization concept is very different from our society. Every Krathani learns to fight because everyone might need to defend territory or resources. Different environments create different solutions, Dr. Carter observed. Humans developed in a way that favored cooperation and division of labor. Your species apparently developed in a way that favored individual combat ability. Amy could see that the Krathani were struggling to understand concepts that seemed natural to humans. Their entire worldview was based on strength and dominance, while human society was built on cooperation and mutual support. Let me ask you something, Commander Vextar, Amy said. In Krathani society, who decides what research project to pursue? Who determines how resources should be allocated? The strongest leaders make these decisions, Vextar replied. Those who have proven their dominance in combat earn the right to control territory and resources. And are these strong leaders always the most knowledgeable about science and engineering? Vextar hesitated. Not always, but strength proves that an individual has the will and ability to make difficult decisions. In human society, we let the experts make decisions in their areas of expertise, Amy explained. Scientists decide what research is most important. Engineers determine how to build things safely and efficiently. Military leaders plan defense strategies. Each person contributes their knowledge where it can be most effective. Through the communication link, Amy could hear excited discussions on the Krathani bridge. Veltar was apparently explaining these concepts to her colleagues, and they were responding with a mixture of interest and skepticism. This raises a troubling question, Vextar said slowly. If human society is organized around cooperation and expertise rather than dominance, and if humans are capable fighters despite preferring peaceful solutions, then our intelligence assessments of your species have been completely wrong. What kind of intelligence assessments? Amy asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Vextar looked uncomfortable. The Krathani Empire has been planning expansion into human-controlled space. Our military analysts concluded that humans would be easy to conquer because you appear to be weak and divided. Amy felt her stomach tighten. This was what she had been afraid of. How many ships are involved in these expansion plans? That information is classified, but I will say that the plans were based on the assumption that human resistance would be minimal and poorly organized. Chief Park spoke up. Commander, if your people attack human colonies based on false assumptions about our capabilities, a lot of beings on both sides can die unnecessarily. I am beginning to understand this, Vextar admitted. But changing military plans that have been in development for months will not be easy. My superiors will want proof that humans are more dangerous than we believed. Amy thought about this problem. How could they convince an entire alien empire to reconsider their invasion plans based on the experience of one ship's crew? What kind of proof will be convincing to your leaders? She asked. Vextar considered this question carefully. In Crithani culture, we settle disputes through formal combat trials. If human warriors could demonstrate their abilities against our champions in controlled conditions, it might prove that your species deserves respect rather than conquest. Lopez stepped forward. Captain, if it would help prevent a war, I'd be willing to participate in formal combat trials. Amy looked around the room at her crew. She could see determination in their faces, but also worry. They all understood the stakes involved. If they could convince the Crithani that humans were formidable opponents, it might prevent a devastating conflict. But if they failed, it might only confirm the aliens' belief that humans were weak. What would these combat trials involve? Amy asked. Representatives from both species would compete in various tests of strength, skill, and tactics. Vextar explained. The results would be recorded and transmitted to Crithani High Command as evidence of human capabilities. Amy made her decision. Commander Vextar, if your people are willing to postpone any military action against human territories, we would be honored to participate in formal combat trials. But we would need guarantees that the results would be fairly evaluated, regardless of the outcome. Vextar's scales lightened to their normal color, and Amy realized that he was relieved by her answer. Captain Rodriguez, I believe this may be the best path forward for both our peoples. I will contact my superiors immediately to propose a solution. While Commander Vextar was communicating with his superiors about the proposed combat trials, Amy received an urgent message from Earth Command. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the secure communications screen in the station's command center, and her expression was very serious. Captain Rodriguez, we've been monitoring unusual Crithani fleet movements in multiple sectors. Our intelligence suggests they may be preparing for a large-scale offensive against human colonies. What's your status with the Crithani vessel at your location? Amy quickly briefed the Admiral on everything that happened, from Vextar's initial demands to proposed combat trials. Admiral Sullivan listened without interruption, but Amy could see her growing concern. Captain, you may have stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple territorial dispute. Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks has been tracking Crithani activities for the past 6 months. Ryan, give the captain your assessment. A young man with dark hair and serious eyes appeared on the screen next to the Admiral. Captain Rodriguez, we believe the Crithani Empire has been conducting systematic intelligence gathering operations throughout human space. They've been testing our defenses, studying our trade routes, and evaluating our military responses to various provocations. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying this encounter was part of a larger plan to invade human territory? That's exactly what we're saying, Brooks replied. The Crithani have been probing our weaknesses for months, apparently preparing for a coordinated attack on multiple human colonies simultaneously. Based on intercepted communications, they believe humans are poorly organized and lack the will to fight effectively. Admiral Sullivan leaned forward. Captain, if what you've told me is accurate, your encounter with Commander Vextar may have provided us with an opportunity to prevent this war before it starts. But we need to understand exactly what the Crithani are planning. Amy thought about her conversations with Vextar and his crew. Admiral, from what the commander told me, their invasion plans are based on completely wrong assumptions about human capabilities. They think we're weak because we prefer diplomacy to violence. They don't understand that choosing peace doesn't mean we can't fight when necessary. That matches our intelligence, Brooks confirmed. Crithani culture is based on dominance and aggression. They interpret human cooperative behavior as weakness rather than strength. Dr. Carter, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. Admiral, if I may suggest something, the Crithani we met seem to be genuinely interested in learning about human culture. They're not mindless aggressors. They're making strategic decisions based on incomplete information. What are you suggesting, Doctor? Admiral Sullivan asked. I think we should give them complete information. Show them exactly what human military forces are capable of when we're forced to defend ourselves. If they understand the real cause of attacking us, they might decide that conquest isn't worth the price. Amy nodded. The commander mentioned that his superiors would need proof that humans are more dangerous than they believed. These combat trials he proposed might be our chance to provide that proof. It's risky, Admiral Sullivan said. If the trials don't go well, it might convince the Crithani that they were right about human weakness. But if we don't try, they're an attack anyway. Amy pointed out, at least this way, we have a chance to prevent the war entirely. Intelligence Officer Brooks brought up a holographic display showing Crithani fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Admiral, our latest intelligence suggests the Crithani are planning to begin their offensive within the next 2 weeks. We don't have time for lengthy diplomatic negotiations. Admiral Sullivan studied the display for a moment, then made her decision. Captain Rodriguez, I'm authorizing you to proceed with these combat trials, but with conditions. First, I'm sending additional personnel to your station, including some of our best combat specialists. Second, we're going to make sure the Crithani understand that the humans they'll be facing represent our actual military capabilities, not just random colonists. Understood, Admiral. What kind of additional personnel are you sending? Master Sergeant David Kim will be leading a team of combat specialists. Kim has 20 years of experience in both human and alien combat techniques. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Williams will handle strategy and tactics demonstration. Dr. Michelle Foster will provide medical support and document everything for our records. Amy was relieved to hear that she would have experienced backup. When will they arrive? They're already en route on the fast courier ship Independence. They should reach your station in approximately 18 hours. Brooks added more information to the holographic display. Captain, while you're preparing for these trials, we'll be monitoring Crithani communications to see how their command structure responds to Commander Vextar's reports. This will give us valuable intelligence about their decision-making process. Amy looked at the display, showing Crithani fleet positions. There were far more ships than she had expected, and they were positioned to attack at least a dozen human colonies simultaneously. The scale of the planned invasion was enormous. Admiral, how many people will be affected if the Crithani attack proceeds as planned? Approximately 2 million civilians across 12 colony worlds, plus whatever military casualties we would take trying to fend them. Admiral Sullivan replied grimly. The colonies have some defensive capabilities, but they're not designed to withstand a major military assault. Dr. Carter whistled softly. That puts a lot of pressure on these combat trials. Yes, it does, the Admiral agreed. But Captain Rodriguez, I want you to understand that preventing this war isn't entirely up to you. We're also preparing military responses in case diplomacy fails. However, your approach may be our best chance to avoid massive casualties on both sides. Amy felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Admiral, I'll do everything I can to make sure the Crithani understand what they would really be facing if they attack human colonies. I know you will, Captain. But remember, you're not just representing yourself or your station. You're representing all of humanity. The Crithani need to see that we're strong enough to defend ourselves, but also wise enough to choose cooperation over conflict when possible. Intelligence Officer Brooks highlighted several points on the holographic display. Captain, these are the Crithani fleet assembly points. If our intelligence is correct, they plan to launch simultaneous attacks from these locations. The trials you're conducting may determine whether those fleets proceed with their mission or return to Crithani space. Amy studied the display carefully. The Crithani have positioned their forces very strategically, choosing targets that would be difficult for human forces to defend simultaneously. Whoever had planned this invasion understood human military capabilities better than she would have expected. Brooks, do we know who's in charge of Crithani invasion planning? We believe it's High Commander Zargoth, one of their most experienced military leaders. He's known for his tactical brilliance and his belief that rapid, overwhelming force is a key to successful conquest. Admiral Sullivan stood up. Captain, I need to brief the Defense Council on this situation. You focus on preparing for those combat trials. The fate of millions of people may depend on convincing one alien commander that humanity is stronger than his empire believes. The communication ended, leaving Amy alone with her thoughts and the enormous responsibility she now carried. She looked around the command center at her crew, all of whom had heard the conversation with Admiral Sullivan. "Well," Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, "I guess we better make sure these trials go well." Amy nodded. "Yes, we had better. Chief Park, start preparing detailed briefings on human military capabilities for our incoming reinforcements. Dr. Carter, I want you to work with their science officer to establish clear rules for the trials. Lieutenant Morrison, monitor all communications with the Chthoni ship and keep me informed of any changes in their status." As her crew began their preparations, Amy looked out the window at the Chthoni warship. Somewhere on that vessel, Commander Vextar was probably having his own difficult conversation with his superiors about the humans he had underestimated. The next few days would determine whether two species could find a path to peace or whether they would be forced into a devastating war that neither side really wanted. The courier ship Independence arrived at Horizon's Edge exactly 18 hours after Admiral Sullivan's transmission, bringing the additional personnel that Amy had requested. Master Sergeant David Kim was a stocky man with graying hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of military experience. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Williams was tall and athletic, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to analyze everything around her. Dr. Michelle Foster was a compact woman with medical equipment and recording devices that would document every aspect of the upcoming trials. Amy met with the new arrivals in the main conference room, along with Commander Vextar and his science officer Veltar, who had transported over from Chthoni's ship to help plan the trials. "The Chthoni High Command has agreed to the combat trials," Vextar announced. "However, they are sending our greatest champion to ensure that the tests will be fair and accurate. Champion Vorgash will arrive tomorrow aboard the heavy cruiser Talon of War." Master Sergeant Kim raised an eyebrow. "Champion? What exactly does that mean in Chthoni culture?" "Vorgash is the most skilled warrior in Chthoni Empire," Veltar explained. "He has never been defeated in single combat, and he has led successful military campaigns against 7 different alien species. He is considered the perfect example of Chthoni's strength and fighting ability." Lieutenant Colonel Williams leaned forward. "What kind of trials are we talking about? Will this be hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical planning, or something else?" Vextar activated a holographic display that showed the proposed trial structure. The trials will consist of 3 parts. First, individual combat between champions from each species. Second, small unit tactics involving teams of 5 warriors. Third, strategic planning using a simulated battle scenario. Amy studied the display carefully. These trials seem designed to favor physical strength and direct confrontation. What about testing other military capabilities that might be important in actual warfare, such as... Veltar asked. Dr. Foster spoke up. "Medical support, engineering under pressure, communications coordination, supply management. Modern warfare involves much more than just fighting." Vextar looked confused. "But those are support functions performed by non-warriors. The trials are meant to test combat ability, not technical skills. That's exactly the kind of thinking that led to your intelligence failures about human capabilities," Williams said bluntly. "In human military doctrine, technical skills and combat skills are equally important. A medic who can keep wounded soldiers fighting is just as valuable as a soldier who can defeat enemies in combat." Chief Engineer Alex Thompson had joined a meeting after completing his shift. He was a quiet man who usually stayed focused on mechanical problems, but Amy had asked him to participate because his technical skills might be relevant to the trials. "Commander Vextar," Thompson said, "would it be possible to include some technical challenges in the trials? Not instead of combat tests, but in addition to them?" Vextar considered this request. "What kind of technical challenges?" "Equipment repair under combat conditions, communication setup in hostile environments, medical treatment of combat injuries. The kind of skills that determine whether a military unit can continue fighting after taking casualties or equipment damage." Veltar's markings brightened with interest. "These support skills are considered equal to combat skills in human military units?" "Absolutely," Amy confirmed. "A soldier who can fix a broken weapon in the middle of battle is just as important as a soldier who can use that weapon effectively. A medic who can treat injuries while under fire can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Commander Vextar communicated with his ship for several minutes, apparently discussing these suggestions with his superiors. When he finished, he looked thoughtful. The High Command has agreed to include technical challenges in the trials, but only as additions to the combat tests. Champion Vorgash will still expect to face your best warriors in direct combat. Master Sergeant Kim smiled grimly. We'll be ready for him. Over the next several hours, the mixed group of humans and Crithani worked together to design fair and comprehensive trials. Amy was impressed by how seriously the aliens took the planning process. They wanted accurate results just as much as the humans did, even though those results might not support their original assumptions. The heavy cruiser Talon of War arrived the following morning, and Amy got her first look at Champion Vorgash when he transported to the station with a support team. If Commander Vextar had been intimidating, Champion Vorgash was absolutely terrifying. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, with dark scales that looked like metal armor and scars that told the story of countless battles. His yellow eyes burned with intelligence and barely controlled aggression. So, Vorgash said, his voice even deeper than Vextar's, "These are the humans who think they can match Crithani warriors in combat." Amy stepped forward to meet him. Champion Vorgash, welcome to Horizon's Edge. We appreciate your willingness to participate in these trials. Vorgash looked down at Amy, and she could see him evaluating her the way a predator might study potential prey. You are the female who defeated Commander Vextar. I am Captain Amy Rodriguez, commander of the station. I have watched a recording of your encounter with Vextar. Interesting technique, but it will not work against an opponent who knows what to expect. Vorgash's scales seemed to shimmer as he spoke, and Amy realized this might be a sign of anticipation or excitement. Master Sergeant Kim stepped up beside Amy. Champion, I'll be participating in the individual combat trials. I look forward to seeing what Crithani fighting techniques can do. Vorgash turned his attention to Kim, and Amy could see the alien warrior assessing this new opponent. Kim was much smaller than the Crithani champion, but there was something in his posture and expression that suggested he was not intimidated by the size difference. You are confident for such a small creature, Vorgash observed. I've been fighting for a long time, Kim replied calmly. Size isn't everything. Dr. Foster had been setting up her recording equipment, and now she spoke to the Crithani champion. Champion Vorgash, I'll be documenting the trial for medical and scientific purposes. Would you mind if I take some baseline measurements before we begin? Vorgash looked at the small human female with what might have been amusement. You wish to study me like a laboratory specimen? I want to understand the physiological differences between our species. Foster explained. This information could be valuable for both humans and Crithani in the future. Very well, but do not expect your measurements to reveal any weaknesses that you can exploit. Lieutenant Colonel Williams had been studying the trial arena that the Crithani had set up in the station's largest cargo bay. The space had been cleared and equipped with various obstacles and equipment that would be used in the different challenges. The arena looks well designed, Williams said to Veltar. Will the trials be conducted under standard gravity conditions? Yes. Both species evolved under similar gravitational conditions, so this should not give either side an unfair advantage. Chief Thompson was examining the technical equipment that would be used in the support skill challenges. These look like standard engineering problems: power system failures, communication breakdowns, equipment damage, the kind of things that happen in real combat situations. Amy looked around at the preparations and felt a mixture of confidence and nervousness. Her people were well-trained and experienced, but they were about to face the greatest warrior of a species that had conquered multiple alien civilizations. The outcome of these trials could determine whether 2 million human civilians lived or died. Are we ready to begin? Vorgash asked, his voice carrying a note of eagerness. Amy nodded. Let's see what humans and Crithani can learn from each other. The trials were about to begin, and with them would come the answers that might prevent a devastating war. Amy just hoped that those answers would be enough to convince the Crithani High Command that humanity deserved respect rather than conquest. Vorgash moved to the center of the arena, his massive form radiating power and confidence. Master Sergeant Kim walked out to meet him, looking small but determined. Around the arena, humans and Chthoni watched in tense silence as two species prepared to test their strength against each other. "Let the trials begin," Commander Vextar announced, and the future of human-Chthoni relations hung in the balance. The trials lasted for 3 days, and by the end, both humans and Chthoni had gained a new understanding of each other's capabilities. Master Sergeant Kim had not defeated Champion Vorgash in direct combat, but he had lasted much longer than anyone expected and had managed to score several successful strikes using techniques that the Chthoni champion had never encountered before. More importantly, the technical challenges had revealed human capabilities that amazed the Chthoni observers. Chief Thompson had repaired complex equipment failures in half the time it took Chthoni engineers. Dr. Foster had treated simulated combat injuries with medical techniques that were far more advanced than anything in Chthoni medicine. Lieutenant Colonel Williams had developed tactical solutions to battle scenarios that the Chthoni had considered impossible to solve. Amy stood in the command center, watching as Champion Vorgash prepared to return to his ship. The massive warrior approached her with something that looked almost like respect in his yellow eyes. "Captain Rodriguez," Vorgash said, "I came here expecting to face weak creatures who could be easily defeated. Instead, I have encountered warriors who fight with intelligence and skill rather than brute strength. Your species is not what our intelligence reports claimed. What will you tell your high command?" Amy asked. "I will tell them the truth. Humans would be formidable opponents in any military conflict. Your soldiers may be smaller than ours, but they are better trained, better equipped, and more adaptable than we expected. An invasion of human space would be far more costly than our planners anticipated." Commander Vextar stepped forward. "Champion, I have been thinking about what we have learned here. Perhaps there is a better path forward than conquest." "What do you mean?" Vorgash asked. "The humans have knowledge and technologies that could benefit the Chthoni Empire. Their medical techniques could save Chthoni lives. Their engineering methods could improve our ships and equipment. Their tactical innovations could make our military more effective against genuine enemies." Amy felt a spark of hope. "Are you suggesting an alliance rather than a war?" "I am suggesting that strong species should work together rather than destroy each other," Vextar replied. "The galaxy has many dangers that threaten all intelligent life. Perhaps humans and Chthoni could face these dangers as allies rather than enemies." Over the next week, more ships arrived at Horizon's Edge. Ambassador Paul Martinez came from Earth with a full diplomatic team, ready to negotiate formal treaties with Chthoni Empire. High Commander Zargoth himself arrived with a fleet of Chthoni warships, but instead of preparing for battle, he came to discuss the possibility of cooperation. Amy found herself in the strange position of hosting peace talks between two species that had been preparing for war just days earlier. The conference room that had witnessed her first confrontation with Vextar now hosted discussions about trade agreements, technology sharing, and joint military operations against common enemies. The Chthoni Empire withdraws all plans for expansion into human space, High Commander Zargoth announced during one of the formal sessions. Captain Rodriguez and her people have demonstrated that humans are worthy of respect and friendship rather than conquest. Ambassador Martinez smiled. Earth is pleased to accept the Chthoni Empire's offer of friendship. We believe that cooperation between our species will benefit both humans and Chthoni. Dr. Carter was practically glowing with excitement as he discussed joint research projects with Veltar and other Chthoni scientists. Think of what we could accomplish together. Chthoni knowledge of mineral extraction, combined with human biotechnology, could revolutionize how we develop new planets. Chief Thompson was having similar discussions with Chthoni engineers about improvements to both species spacecraft designs. "Your armor plating techniques are incredible," he told them, "and we might be able to help you develop more efficient engine systems." Amy watched these discussions with satisfaction, but also with awareness that the real work was just beginning. Building trust between species that had almost gone to war would take time and effort from both sides. Captain Rodriguez, High Commander Zargoth, said during a private conversation, "The Chthoni Empire owes you a great debt. Your actions prevented a war that would have caused enormous suffering for both our peoples. I was just doing my job, Commander, protecting my people and finding peaceful solutions to difficult problems. You did much more than that. You showed us that our assumptions about humanity were wrong, and you gave us a chance to choose a better path. The Krathani will not forget this. 2 months later, Amy stood in the same spot where she had first watched the stars from Horizon's Edge, but now the view was very different. The research station had been expanded to accommodate both human and Krathani personnel. Scientists from both species worked together in the labs, sharing knowledge and developing new technologies. Security teams trained together, learning each other's techniques and building mutual respect.